Charles, Joe Biden
Jason.
is having a very bad, horrible, not good day.
And he's
I
on.
see what the problem is. Here we go. Sorry, hang on. I'm
No problem.
not close behind. These road shows, Charles. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Surviving here in what's left of Manhattan.
Yeah.
Um, it's really, I mean, by the time you get back, I don't know what will be left of Manhattan. It's, you know, Manhattan well, and in particular, you must remember the area around NYU and in particular 8th Street, which prior to the Christmas holiday season, it was bad. But I just walked to do an errand up on 8th and Broadway, and it seemed to me that 50% of this of the 8th Street and 50% of from 8th to Ninth on Broadway is vacant.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised. I'm not happy, but I'm not surprised to hear that. New York City has been going into the toilet for the past, I don't know, certainly 3 years. Joe Biden is having an extremely bad, terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. He's had several of those, Charles. Unfortunately, you and I haven't really had a chance to dive into this. We did in the last show, but it just keeps getting worse for Joe Biden. And I want to thank you, Charles. I know you enjoy speaking your mind, and I enjoy creating the opportunity for you to do that. So I wanted to thank you for specifically requesting today's show take place in the First Amendment Forum. Our viewers are going to be able to join us there by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and odyssey.com. I'm really excited about Odyssey, Charles. It's a great way for people to watch our shows and to also support Crowdsource the Truth. I think I've mentioned this to you. I don't know why, but there are certain people out there who dislike Odyssey, and I really like it because it's an independent platform that is completely independent of all of these different big tech sort of things. And it's a great way for people to enjoy the show. And it's on a totally different video stream as well. So that's really cool. People can watch the simulcasts of the live show and also the sponsor exclusive content. But what is it that we're going to be getting into today, Charles?
Well, I think without bragging too much, you and I have been months ahead, maybe in some cases years ahead of the mainstream press, uh, trying to explain what we believe is actually going on in the reality in which you and I live and others live, as distinct from the stipulated reality, the term you like to use, which I'm beginning to like too, that is produced by libtards and rhinos around the world, actually, and beamed to everybody via mainstream media, academia, and social media. And so this is a moment in time. There are our colleague Steve Bannon and others are beginning to catch up to where we were weeks ago on this story. And I want to be able to talk about it without fear of being censored by YouTube, because I think it's
Yeah.
an important message we're going to get into once we flip over to the First Amendment Forum. So thanks
Yeah.
for doing that.
I really
And thanks
appreciate.
for that.
No, no, you go.
Uh, I was going to say, and the art department again, I mean, this is now well past the category of my 150 framed 16th and 17th century maps. We don't have frames yet, but the material in many ways is much better. And when I think if we ever can get them in close to being in one place, even if it's just 150 of the 600 pieces, uh, I think that says assified, doesn't it? Uh,
Well, close.
these weren't classified; these were assified documents. I could do what I wanted with them. I'm an
That's when
asshole.
Hunter gets his hands on them.
That's right. He's going to have more kids he doesn't grandkids he doesn't want to admit to. Imagine sullying the Biden name.
Yeah.
That would take doing.
Well, it's interesting, Charles, because you have been speaking about somebody who we're going to be looking at and who Steve Bannon was talking about. You've been speaking about this person really for quite some time. And again, the bulk of our conversation will be over in the First Amendment Forum. But Dana Remus, I believe when you spoke to her, she was the attorney for the Obama Foundation. She's now Joe Biden's personal attorney. I think people have come to realize that Charles, I don't really trust or like most attorneys. I think this might be another one.
Well, this person, I have to say, before we get into the First Amendment Forum, was very genuine in the way she dealt with me, very professional. We don't play on the same team, for sure. I made it known, which is the case, that I have no political ambitions of any kind. And I'm not saying that because I really do and I want you to beg me to run. I just have no interest in it. And I made that clear to her. And I made it clear to her that my focus of the phone call with her was on the subject of the Obama Foundation and its grievous and perilous nature. And she listened politely and we had good banter. But I think I'll be able to connect some dots in this First Amendment Forum for people that need to be connected. And I hope folks like Jim Comer and Jim Jordan and Ron Johnson and others, eventually, maybe people in the crowd could send this YouTube to them, because we could cut through a lot of wasted time getting to the nub of this issue. This, to tease what we're going to talk about, this scandal was, as Trump would say, huge before we got into this podcast. But because of events that have happened in the last 72 hours or so, I would argue that this is the biggest set of scandals in the history of America.
Yeah,
it is a gigantic set of scandals. And it has to do with both parties turning public service, a sacrifice, into a way to feed more at the trough, to get to the trough more quickly and to pay less, and to get banquets 24/7 from the trough while doing nothing.
Not just raccoon roadkill dinners either, Charles. We're talking about fancy banquets.
Exactly. And I'm beginning to think, well, just a little bit of offbeat humor. We didn't cover this story in part because it's a little gross, and I'll forgive me for telling the story. But I was reading. We've talked about George H.W. Bush going on a state banquet and ralphing all over either the emperor or the prime minister of Japan in a state dinner thrown for him. But recently, and you can imagine, Biden, I've never seen anybody fall up a set of stairs before. I mean, that's really remarkable. But there's a story in the press, there are multiple stories in the past about how Biden liked to, when he was vice president, go to Camp David and taunt the female members of the Secret Service who were guarding Camp David and just strip buck naked and jump in the pool and cavort in the pool.
Terrible.
Yeah, he's the kind of guy I would imagine on Air Force One who might do what some really guy who couldn't hold his alcohol did on a recent flight. I think it was an Air India flight. Some mid-level manager got completely toasted on business class on Air India, and needed to go to the bathroom. And he was so drunk, he decided he'd take a leak. He thought the urinal was in the seat next to him. So he peed all over this 60-plus-year-old woman. That's the kind of behavior at this stage I expect out of Biden. I mean, he's going to do something that stupid on his way out the White House.
P-gate. Wow.
Exactly.
They're talking about it here. It's P-gate. Air India P-gate tagged urinator Mishra.
Well, it's a horrible thing to do to anybody, but the reaction of the airline was even worse.
What they did?
They took this woman aside, and there was no spare seat for her. So at first they put her up in the cockpit with the crew and tried to tell her, listen, it's not that bad.
Wow.
I don't know that they said at least it wasn't number two, but so they tried to talk her down from making a big scene about it. And then because there was no other seat, they forced her to ride the rest of the way back to wherever the flight was going, seated next to this guy who kept trying to Yeah, as he got more and more sober, he was trying to plead with her, "I'll lose my job, I'll lose my." Anyway, the airline looked into it and ultimately, I think, disciplined a whole bunch of people. But this is what
Wow.
I now. I mean, this would be Biden on a good day, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, it is amazing how he's had just so many bad days. It's this cascade of disasters. We're going to get into it in just a moment on the First Amendment Forum. Before we do that, Charles, I just wanted to remind people, they can kind of catch up in general with Crowdsource the Truth developments by visiting crowdsourcethetruth.org. You can also get there on crowdsourcethetruth.com. I've got a link to the Twitter coup, and you mentioned James Comer earlier. This is the document that I handed to James Comer and other members of Congress. People can also watch the live streams on here. I usually have the daily shows embedded. And Charles, we're not going to be talking about this too much, or actually at all today, but there's been a major deal. I have amended my complaint in Goodman v. Boozy and sued a number of interesting people, including the former executive director of the Department of Homeland Security's Disinformation Governance Board, Nina Jankowicz, and Benjamin Wittes of the Brookings Institution. So hopefully people will visit crowdsourcethetruth.com, check out that pleading. There's going to be a lot going on in court, but there's going to be even more going on in just about 5 minutes on the First Amendment Forum. People can get to that on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. We'll be right back, and the show will get underway in the First Amendment Forum